Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I'm your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hi, everybody. What are we getting into today, Trace?
Well, Christine, let me ask you a question. What is the worst possible thing that could happen to you as a woman or a mother?
Losing a child. Is that what we're going to talk about, damn it?
Damn it. Yes, that's what we're talking about. And for me, I agree with you. My number one worst possible thing that could ever happen to me would be my children disappearing, never to return. I just don't know how parents deal with this. I would be lost. I would be sick. And I would be hunting for them. And especially, I would want to get my hands on that SOB that took them. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I am not the one. I am not the one who could sit back and allow the justice system to do its job and hope that the disgusting piece of garbage got exactly what he deserved. There are too many instances where the justice system puts predators in prison only to let them out, and they pick right back up where they left off. Then the cycle repeats itself over and over again. And because of this, many women and young girls are taken, raped, murdered, and dumped or buried when they should have been safe. With all that being said, let's get into it. This is Season 4, Episode 3, 4 Missing Girls. Now, my main source for today's episode is from the series called The Lake Erie Murders. And when the show begins, Oprah Winfrey is interviewing Leslie Allen Williams. His mother was Dorothy. She had 2 daughters with her first husband. Lyle Williams was Dorothy's second husband, of which together they had 3 boys, and one of those boys was Leslie. He was born on July 4th, 1963, in Detroit. Now, word on the street is that Leslie's mother was neglectful of her children, and his mother was a prostitute, and she turned tricks in her home. Now, I'm assuming with her children in the home as well. Some of the neighborhood kids had seen the 2 daughters performing oral sex on their stepfather, Lyle. The authorities were notified, and Lyle was taken into custody. He told police that while his wife would turn tricks in their home, he would watch from the inside of their bedroom closet. Lyle was sent to and institutionalized at the State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Ionia, where he served 4 years. Dorothy and Lyle were divorced in 1961 after his release. Dorothy tried her luck and another marriage in California, but this would turn out to be a huge mistake. There she met a man named James Adams, and the 2 were married in 1962. But Dorothy was a bad picker, and this relationship was imploding. Dorothy filed for her divorce within the first year of marriage. The night before their divorce hearing, with a gun in tow, James went looking for Dorothy, and when he found her, he killed her by shooting her in the head before turning the gun on himself. Now, I don't know what happened with Dorothy's 2 daughters from her first marriage, but the 3 boys she had with her from her second husband, Lyle, were with her in California. After the murder-suicide, the 3 boys were sent back to Milford, Michigan, to live with Dorothy's parents. Now, I've heard that Leslie was in trouble with the law since he was 8 years old, but I couldn't find any details on what happened in those early years of his life. But in 1970, at 17 years old, Leslie had broken into a neighbor's home, of which he was sentenced with probation. Now, here's a litany of crimes that Leslie would go on to commit: more breaking and entering, auto theft, assault with attempt to commit murder, and first-degree sexual assault. In 1983, he was convicted. He pleaded guilty for assault with attempt to commit kidnapping and assault with attempt to sexually penetrate. He did this less than 2 weeks after getting out of prison. For the crimes that he pled guilty to, he was only sentenced to 5 to 10 years and another 7 to 30 years for being a habitual offender. In 1990, Leslie was paroled after only serving 7 years. The impetus for getting parole, you might wonder? Well, his therapist, while he was in prison, wrote a stellar letter of recommendation for Leslie. Like, really? Was his therapist also a deviant? Or was he just that good?
I'm a little confused. Dorothy is Leslie's mother.
Yeah.
So Dorothy was the one that was turning tricks and letting our daughters get abused and had the bad picker. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
So all of that was background to that Leslie had a fucked up life from the get-go. And then, of course, he turned into an abuser and the bad choice for everyone around him. And then he did all this on a spree and went to prison.
Okay, so when he was in prison, I'm assuming he was seeing a therapist because it's the therapist who wrote this letter of recommendation as to why Leslie should be paroled. That's how he got out.
Oh, I'm not sure if I agree with any of that.
I know.
See, that's the thing. That's even the thing, it's kind of hot and in the news right now, the whole Menendez brothers things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, I think that their history should have been brought up in their trial, which apparently it wasn't in the second trial, blah, blah, blah. And they served, I don't know, over 2 decades in jail, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry to deviate to a whole nother story, but just to touch on how the abuse feeds into it, but it's not a get out of jail free card. Like the Menendez brothers, they're not getting out of jail free. They did go to jail for a long, long time. They're just not going to serve the original life sentences they were sentenced with. But that's because of the abuse played into it and made them not necessarily a menace to society, just really, really a menace to their parents, apparently, because of what their parents did to them. However, it remains to be seen whether or not they'd be a menace to society, because they'd be like this Leslie guy and just pay it forward on the abuse scale, right? In this instance, they're trying to use it as a get out of jail free card. Is that what's happening? Because he was abused, they're bringing all this into effect?
Yeah, and I'm not certain what I never did in my research find this letter anywhere. So I don't know what was contained in the letter. And you could absolutely be right. Maybe the therapist was saying, this kid was horribly damaged. His mother was a prostitute. He saw a lot of bad things going on. I don't know what all was in the letter. But when it was time for him to come up for parole, because he had a therapist, speaking highly of this guy and that, hey, who knows? Maybe he said, in 7 years we've been in deep therapy and he's good. He's not going to hurt anybody. That's how good this guy was at manipulation. And they bought it. They let him out.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah. When they are bad people, they do tend to become students of the human psyche a little bit, get away with what they want to get away with. And they do become master manipulators. It is wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm caught up now. All right.
Okay. All right. So now Leslie's out on parole, right? So like all parolees, Leslie has to check in with his parole officer twice a month. He would also present check stubs to provide evidence that he was also holding down a job. Now, Leslie's probation was only for 3 years, and by August of 1993, he would have met and completed his parole sentence. Now, during his probationary time, his probation officer said that Leslie was a model parolee. How about that? But then, on one fine day, on May 24th, 1992, a couple had spotted a man abducting a woman from a cemetery. The couple immediately knew that a crime was occurring and started to run out of the cemetery. And luckily for them, there was a policeman right there. They reported what they had just witnessed, and just then the officer had seen the make and model of the car that had just been described to him, along with a matching description of the man driving, and a chase then ensued. During the chase, the car made a sharp left turn, lost control, and went off the road, and the man driving tried to escape on foot, but the officer was right on him. He successfully tackled Leslie down to the ground and placed him in handcuffs. And after the handcuffs were on, the officer had heard a noise coming from the trunk of Leslie's car. While Leslie remained lying on the ground in cuffs, the officer popped the trunk to find a 35-year-old woman by the name of Carla Walters. She had her hands cuffed behind her back with those plastic zip tie cuffs, and one of those zip tie cuffs was also tightly around her neck. She was barely breathing. The officer was able to cut the zip tie around her neck, and she began taking deep, heaving breaths. Other items seen in the trunk was a gun, a knife, and plastic zip cuffs. When taken into custody, Leslie denied committing any other crimes, but that was a lie. Now again, Oprah Winfrey had done the episode on serial killers and rapists, and Leslie was a part of her show. He attended via teleprompter. She began her show by saying, quote, "This man is a serial rapist, and he vows that he will rape and kill again." "You kill somebody and then you go home and do what?" she asked. Leslie responded with an exhale, quote, "You just let it go." So there you have it. No remorse, no nothing. Just a wild animal driven to keep satisfying his dark desires. So now we know the crime that Leslie was caught doing, which landed him in prison for the abduction and intent to rape and more than likely kill. But there were others that were not as lucky as Carla Walters. In a small town named Milford, within a 20-mile radius, 4 young girls had gone missing. The town was sick with worry, the parents brokenhearted and searching for their girls. So let's walk back to what happened while Leslie was being the model parolee living in Milford. Now, Milford, Michigan is a small village located in Oakland County, near Detroit, near the bottom of the thumb. Milford is known for being the home of the Milford General Motors Proving Ground, and I was like, what the heck is that? So I looked it up. I found this interesting. This was the industry's first dedicated automobile testing facility, and it opened in 1924. The General Motors Milford Proving Ground remains the longest continuously operating proving ground in the world, and it covers more than 4,000 acres, and I found that interesting. And now we're all a little bit smarter, so there. Boom. Now, Milford has always been considered a safe place to live and to raise your family. You know, the old adage that people never even lock their doors? Well, until now. Alana Heft moved to Milford along with her 5 daughters after a tough breakup and divorce because it was such a safe place and a great place to raise her children. The oldest of her daughters was 15-year-old Cynthia Marie Jones, but everyone called her Cindy. As with being a single mother of 5 girls, working a ton of hours to take care of her family, it was Cindy that she could always count on to help her. She was extremely intuitive and just jumped right in and did what she saw needed to be done. Cindy had been dating a 16-year-old boy for approximately 6 months. His name was Luke. Cindy was into gymnastics, cheerleading, and was in the marching band, and Luke was an all-pro in the sports program in their high school. It was January 4th, 1992, when Luke was over at the house hanging out with Cindy. It was getting dark, and the kids wanted to go hang out at the park for a little while together. They asked Alana, Cindy's mom, if they could go for a little bit. Now, initially, she said she wanted to tell them no, but she agreed they could go. But before they left the house, Alana reminded them that they needed to be aware of their surroundings and to stay close to one another. Only 1 hour after the kids left for the park, dispatch received a call from a young man. It was Luke. He was crying and very upset. The dispatcher said, quote, "Go ahead, please." On the other line, she heard, quote, "It's my girlfriend. He took my girlfriend. He did a robbery. He robbed a store or something. He tied us up. I don't know where he robbed. Oh, God, not Cindy. Then I ran after them, but they just disappeared. I don't know where." The detective that was assigned to this caller and the case, who's now a retired detective sergeant named Tom Callahan. Luke had run into town and made a call to dispatch from a restaurant and waited there until the police arrived. They found Luke sitting in a booth. He was very upset and crying. He was having a difficult time talking about what had just happened. Once they could get Luke to calm down, this is what they learned. It was approximately 7:30 p.m. They were at Central Park, where they told Cindy's mom they would be having a soda. This park is less than 1 mile from Cindy's home. The two of them were in the park, sitting in Luke's car, talking and enjoying each other's company, when a man approached them wearing a mask, brandishing a big knife, and shining a flashlight in their eyes. He said,
"Freeze! Stay where you are, and don't move. Be quiet. I'm not going to hurt you. I just need the car. I did a robbery, and I need your car to get out of town. I'm not going to hurt you."
The kids were instructed to get out of the car, and they were led back into the woods into the park. They were told that they were going to both be tied up to a tree, and then he was going to take their car. First, Luke was sat down on the ground, hands were put behind his back around the tree, and his hands were zip-tied. Now that Luke was bound, it was Cindy's turn, but that's not what happened. The man said he was going to be taking Cindy with him. When Luke said, "Wait, you said you were going to tie us both up and take the car," the man said, quote,
"I lied."
and grabbed Cindy by the arm and took off with her through the woods. Needless to say, Luke was freaking out, crying out Cindy's name, calling her name, struggling against the plastic wire cuffs. He kept pulling hard with his hands, and luckily, he was able to break them. Luke immediately started running off in the direction the man and Cindy headed off in, back and forth, up and down, screaming for Cindy. But they were gone. He ran until he came upon a restaurant, where then he called the police. While detectives were talking with Luke in the restaurant, they had other officers checking to see if any local businesses had been robbed, and there were no reports of it. While Luke was giving the accounts of the night to detectives, his sequence of events were not really lining up, which made the detectives question if this was really what had happened. Was Luke the one who did something to Cindy? Was this whole story made up? The whole thing just seemed off to detectives. But Luke took them back to Central Park and to the tree where he was tied up. And sure enough, there they were. They found the plastic zip-tie cuffs busted on the ground behind the tree. They were very surprised that Luke was able to break the plastic ties, and perhaps they were a little defective, and that's how he was able to do it, because they were industrial strength quality. Luke pointed detectives in the direction that the man and Cindy had gone. As they walked down the path with their flashlights, they saw a man-sized boot print in the mud, and alongside those boot prints were a smaller-sized shoe print. Now, Luke's story was proving to them to be true. They photographed the boot impressions and compared them with Luke's shoes. They clearly were not a match, and Luke was cleared as a suspect. Oh my God, this poor kid.
Yeah, that's horrible that they weren't believing him. But at the same time, I have to say, what is the deal with Michigan and the Cinderella versions of how to solve crimes?
Apparently, it's a thing.
They love the boot prints.
It's a thing, and it works. So detectives then went to Alana's home, and they asked her if she had a daughter named Cindy Jones. When she said she did, they informed her that Cindy had been abducted. Oh my God, could you even imagine what that woman was going through? She said, "Abducted? What does that even mean?" I don't even know if I could think straight if a police officer told me that. I don't know how I would deal with it.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever be good with that.
I don't think I would even be able to form a sentence or think straight. That's crazy. Now that the detectives opened a kidnapping case, they brought in the FBI. So at this point, you have the FBI, the Oakland County Police, and the Milford Police Department searching for Cindy. The Michigan State Police were searching via helicopter to assist in the search. So not only do we have air search, we have horseback and on-foot searches being conducted at the same time. It was decided that they would lower the water in the Huron River at the park so they could search for Cindy there. Approximately 15 divers from the Oakland County Police dive team searched every bit of the river in the park, but they came up with nothing. There were multiple requests from the police department to the public that if anyone had any information, please bring it forward. But there was nothing. No tips, no leads. It's now been weeks since Cindy was abducted, and a multi-agency task force was put together. The task force consisted of the Milford County Sheriff's Department, the Michigan State Police, and the FBI. As they were all sharing all the information they had, they saw a pattern of abductions over the last handful of months. 3 months before Cindy was abducted, just 20 miles north of Milford in a town called Fenton, 2 sisters had disappeared. And their names are Michelle and Melissa Urban. Michelle was 16 years old, and Melissa was 14. Kathy and Patrick are the parents of the 2 girls, as well as a younger daughter who was 12 at the time her sisters went missing. It was September 29th, 1991, when Michelle and Melissa had just finished doing the dishes after dinner. They were chomping at the bit to head out for their nightly walk. The 2 girls would do this walk together every night. It was their thing. Their father, Patrick, said they loved going for their walks, and sometimes they would walk for hours. But on this night, they didn't return from their walk. It was sometime after midnight when Kathy and Patrick decided they needed to call the police. When the police arrived at the Urban home, Kathy and Patrick gave them the route that the girls would normally walk. Immediately, the search began of the area. Kathy had told reporters that on September 29th, when she woke up that morning, she had a strange feeling that something was going to happen. Oh, God, Christine, there's that mother's intuition again. But just like Cindy, they were gone, and it was almost as if they had just vanished.
Yeah, that mother felt it in her bones. That's horrible.
Yeah, could you imagine waking up with that feeling and then your girls are gone? Unreal.
No, I cannot imagine it. I refuse to imagine it. I don't ever want to imagine it. And my heart breaks for all of those that ever have to even hint of an idea of it happening. Ugh.
Yeah. And just like we've talked about before with these other mothers, this lady didn't say no, but she didn't feel right. She had a feeling something was wrong or something was going to happen. I'm sure she blamed herself for, well, both of the parents for letting them go. But how would they know? I mean, they did this every night.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hindsight. So the task force now started looking into a third missing girl, and her name was Cami Villanueva. She had gone missing from her home on September 14th, 1991. At the time of her disappearance, she was 18 years old and a senior in high school. She was living in South Lyon, and this disappearance was just 2 weeks before the sisters. South Lyon is 10 miles south of Milford. Cammie's mother, the story's so bad. Kathy's mother had died a year before her disappearance, and her father abandoned Cammie along with her 2 older sisters. Like, what in the actual? And, oh my God, these poor young ladies. But they banded together, and they were all helping to raise Cammie. Cammie had been out with some friends, then arrived home at 10 p.m. on September 14th. Her older sister, Trish, arrived home around midnight and was calling for Cammie, but there was no answer. So she looked in Cammie's bedroom. Her lights were on, but Cammie wasn't there. Her sister just thought, well, maybe she went out with her friends and will be home in the morning. But when morning came, no Cammie. And this is when Trish called police to report her sister missing. But just like Cindy, Michelle, and Melissa, it was like Cammie had just vanished. The Air National Guard was brought in and performed air searches. Police and detectives interviewed Cammie's friends, but nothing. Approximately 100 people canvassed the neighborhood looking for Cammie, but again, nothing. Every single tip and lead that came in were fully investigated, but again, no Cammie. The task force was trying to figure out if there was a pattern here for these 4 girls, but they just couldn't put one together. Were they connected? If so, how? So the FBI brought in a profiler, and he was not convinced there was a pattern because in all three cases, they were all so different. Cammie was taken from her bedroom, the sisters were taken together during a walk, and Cindy was taken when she was with her boyfriend. And to them, none of those puzzle pieces were fitting. So it was thought that it was not the same person involved in all three scenarios. So there was no choice but for the task force to break up, leaving each city to do their own individual investigations. It's now been 4 months since Cindy was taken from Central Park, and this is when we circle back to the beginning of the story. So remember when I told you about the witnesses in the cemetery who saw a man abduct a woman? They called the police, and then they captured Leslie Allen Williams, the model parolee. Yeah, we're back to that guy. Remember he said he hadn't committed any other crimes while on parole? Well, just like he told Luke when he took Cindy, he lied. Big shocker there, right? I also told you that in the trunk of Leslie's car was a gun, a knife, and plastic wire ties. When they were looked at, detectives found that they were from the same manufacturer used to bind Luke to the tree in Central Park when Cindy was taken. One of the detectives said, quote, "I'm just going to call it what it is. He's just a complete dirtbag." During the 11 o'clock news, they aired images of Leslie being arrested. The police received a call from a woman, and this woman used to be the girlfriend of Leslie's. She went on to tell detectives that the year prior, when she was in a relationship with Leslie, that she had bought a kitten that came up missing. When she confronted Leslie about it, he flat out said, "Yeah, I killed your cat. I'll take you to where I buried it if you'd like me to." Of course, she wanted to go, so Leslie took her to a place just 4 miles south of Milford, in a field. The woman told detectives where this was, and so they immediately went to that field and started searching. And sure enough, they located an area that to them looked like it had been disturbed. So they started digging. And once they were down into the earth approximately a couple of feet, what they found was not a kitten. To them, it was obvious. They had a person. It was through dental records that the person who had been found was 18-year-old Cammie Villanueva. A search was also being conducted at Leslie's home. During the search, they had found a box of jewelry, and in that box, a ring. And that ring belonged to Cammie. Boom. Gotcha. With the ring and evidence in hand, Leslie was confronted, and now he was like pretty much, "Yeah, you got me." And boy, oh boy, did he have a lot to say. He confessed to taking all 4 girls and started to go into great detail about what he did, and all the while showed zero emotion.
So all this time, he's sitting there, and they have him on multiple murders, and he just starts telling them what happened.
Mm-hmm.
He polluted in all ways. So he just was like, "Oh, well, they got one body, so let me tell you about all of them." Or did he bury them all in the same place?
No, they were not all buried in the same place, and we'll get into that. But yeah, like, they were showing him pictures. Like, here's Cindy's picture, because initially they showed her, and he's like, "Nope, don't know who she is, boop, boop, boop." And now they're like, "Okay, we have a body, we found this ring in your house." So I guess maybe he just felt like getting it off his shoulders. I don't know. I don't think he had any remorse about it. Maybe he just thought, well, they're going to get me, so why not? Maybe he was tired of it at the moment. Maybe he needed a break. He needed a little respite.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so.
All right, onward. Now, remember when I was talking about Cammie on the night she disappeared, and early in the night she and her friends had, gone out, and they had actually stopped at a party store before she went home that night. Well, Leslie was the clerk at that store. Remember he had a job? Yeah, he worked at this little party store where she popped in at, and he had set his sights on her. He told detectives that he knew where she lived. Now, how in the hell you just happened to know where Cammie lived? I think he might have left out the part that he'd probably been stalking her, or he ditched work and followed her home. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's what had happened.
Yeah.
What had happened is that he stalked all of these girls at one time or place and preyed on them when he found an opportunity.
Yep.
All scumbags do. Opportunistic parasites of the world.
Yep. And anyway, he said, quote, I just happened to be driving by her house and thought, I wonder if anyone else is home. He said it was just a spur of the moment thing. So he was window peeping and he didn't see anyone in the home. Then he found Cammie's bedroom window where he saw her sitting on her bed playing cards. He went to the front door and found it was unlocked. So he went in with a knife in hand and took Cammie. He took her to the field where her body was found, and there he raped her, strangled her, took her ring, and then buried her. After this confession, he went with detectives to show them where he had buried Cindy Jones. Her body was just 1 mile to the west of Cammie's burial site. As Leslie was leading the detectives through the woods, he all of a sudden stopped, pointed down, and said, I buried her right there. So they started to dig, and then they saw it. It was Cindy, and she was wearing the black leather jacket she was wearing the night she was taken from Central Park. Again, they observed Leslie's behavior. There was just nothing, void of the realization that this is a young girl that he killed and buried. He told detectives that he was just hanging out, hiding in the trees in Central Park the night that Cindy and Luke were sitting in their car talking. He went on to say that he watched them for a while, and when the time was right, he donned his ski mask, pulled out his flashlight and a knife. After he tied Luke to the tree, he took Cindy and put her in his car, which he had hidden. He took her to his apartment, which was near Detroit, and this is where he raped her. After the assault, he had her get dressed and put her back in his car. He kept telling her that everything was going to be okay and that he was going to drop her off at her home. And she believed him. Once they were back in Milford, both Leslie and Cindy were walking through the woods to get her home, but Leslie had no intention of taking her home. He said that he was going to tie and gag her again. Now, I'm sure telling her that everything was going to be fine helped with her being compliant. And this is where I would have ran and screamed, God damn it. You know what I mean? Take the chance. Run. Right? The moment this dude told me he was going to tie and gag me again, like, come on. If he's taking me home, why in the world would I have to be tied and gagged? Take your chances and run like hell. Well, since Leslie couldn't take the chance of letting her go after she was tied, he plunged a knife into her chest. He then grabbed a shovel and buried her right there. So now that they had Cindy, it was time for Leslie to take detectives to where he buried the Urban sisters. Leslie told them that he had been stalking the girls for weeks. He knew the girls' route when they would go for a walk. He said they were always together. So when he felt the time was right to strike, he popped out of the woods, brandished his knife, and told the girls to get off the trail and into the woods. There he raped each sister, then strangled them. Ugh. Again, I know that you don't want to leave your sister, but why in the world did one of those sisters not run when he was raping the other one? Because when he raped them, he had them separated. And then after he raped and killed them, he covered them with a blanket and buried them together or like near or in a cemetery in Fenton, like in their hometown where they lived. On June 1st, 1992, all 4 girls were buried in their respective hometowns. In court, Leslie pled guilty to murdering all 4 girls and told how he did it. He was sentenced to a life of imprisonment and will live out the rest of his life in Carson City Correctional Facility. As I said in the beginning of the episode, Leslie said that if he ever gets out of prison, he will rape and kill again.
But he didn't say that the first time, so he got let out the first time after being a horrific human being. And now all of a sudden he just decides, hey, we'll just tell the truth.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't understand how he got out in the first place because these crimes started happening right after he got out.
Mm-hmm. While on parole, no less. Checking in. Hey, I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing. Look at me, got a job, playing the mind game. All the while, it's a big fucking joke.
But that's what I'm saying. why did he go from a dubious liar to all of a sudden now he's like, you got me. I would rape and kill again. I'd do it again. Or is he just being a impetus idiot? Yeah, he's probably just being an impetus idiot. Never mind. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no any of that. In this case, though, these are the cases where Michigan should have the death penalty. For these types of cases, there is no reason why this man should breathe another breath. Ugh, I can't.
Like full on confessing. Like there should be a special place in a prison for.
Should be a cemetery plot for people like this. No prison. That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, I'm not like for the death penalty, but at the same time, like sometimes an eye for an eye is befitting. Sometimes the archaic eye for an eye is exactly what should happen.
I couldn't agree more.
Ugh.
I couldn't agree more. And it makes me sick that we're paying to keep him alive. We pay.
Right. That's what I mean. It's like a perpetual crime against the rest of us when they keep fuckers like this alive.
I know, it's disgusting. Yeah, give this dude a cookie with a little cyanide in it. Bye.
Yeah.
We need to bake some cookies.
All right, so that was a very horrible story.
It was.
Over.
Me too. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming back. We hope you have a great week, and we will see you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.